The question is no longer whether this current system is going to crumble or not. The question is more, when is it going to happen? See, this old matrix of control and greediness doesn't support life. And whatever doesn't support life, it's by its own definition self destructive. The more we resist this transition and the longer we keep holding on to the old paradigms, the harder it's going to be for us all. And the harsh truth is that the trauma we don't deal with today is the trauma that we're going to pass on to the future generations. I really like this quote that although trauma may not be your fault, healing is your responsibility. And I understand a lot of people confuse this word responsibility. But what does it mean really? What is responsibility? Responsibility is simply your ability to respond to a situation, right? So taking responsibility, and here's where a lot of people get confused. Guys, taking responsibility is not taking the fault. Taking responsibility simply means that you acknowledge what has happened and you do what it takes in order to overcome that situation, to adapt and to change the patterns of suffering. So, taking responsibility is really not about blame, it's about gaining back the power to create the life that you want. Because as long as we keep pointing fingers, and I understand, like, there are people who do harm and there are people who suffer the consequences of that harm, absolutely. And there are people who have been victims of many things, absolutely. I'm not taking away that, right? What I'm saying is that if you've been a victim at one point, you shouldn't define yourself as a victim all your life, right? That unfortunate event that happened had a beginning and an end, because everything has a beginning and an end. And taking responsibility means that, okay, what am I going to do now to make sure that I learn the lessons that I had to learn, to make sure that the same pattern doesn't repeat again. Blaming and pointing fingers, I mean, it might feel good to vent, but in reality, it's not going to change anything in your life. Because I believe from any situation, no matter how hard it may seem, from any situation, there is something to learn, right? And if we take that, and if we take that lesson and we make it a blessing for us, then there's a lot of growth that can happen from even the biggest trauma. But it is important that, we go through that period of grief. There is a period that I very much respect, right? That's the period of grief. That's the period of expressing the emotions, expressing the pain, whatever emotions that you're dealing with. It's important to express them and it's important to, live them, transmute them. But once you have processed, because there's a time, to process the trauma. Once you have processed all the trauma, then you come to a point where it's important to start doing the healing work in order to let it go with ease and grace at your own pace, right? This is not a race. This is not a competition. It's at your own pace, however you feel comfortable, little steps at a time. In the end, if you add them up, at the end of like a year, 2 years, 3 years, it can make a huge difference in your life. But first, it's important to acknowledge the trauma and the trauma that you don't deal with. Unfortunately, if you don't know how to deal with your own trauma, you're going to at one point project it on those around you. And by doing that, you're going to hurt the people that you love the most. So it's either you go and dive deep within the aspects of yourself that you probably not wanting to see, deep within your shadows, or you start projecting your shadows around you and, repelling people that you actually love, that you want around you. So be the one who has the courage to look at the depth of your own wounds, to see the shadows that you refuse to see, to hear the voice of your inner child that you refuse to hear, to speak the words of your heart that were silent for too long, and step into the version you know you can be. So be the curse breaker, be the one who changed the story.